David.
Hello.
Hi, David. Okay, well, it looks like there's a few more people that are coming and we're gonna wait just a little bit. Now, Scott, you're not leaving the commission you're on, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, because I saw that they're interviewing for it. I think they interviewed last night, right?
I believe so, but no,
Yeah.
I'm not leaving.
Yes,
Okay, good.
They did,
They did.
but it was for an opening. Scott needed company.
I think it's for the position that Linda Sell vacated.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I have to give public recognition to Scott. When the housing element was put forth to his commission, he knew so much about the housing element. I was so impressed.
Thank you.
You did your homework for sure.
Light 400-page reading.
Yeah. It's good for insomnia, that's for sure. Okay, so maybe we should just start, since I know that Angela likes to start on time. So the reason that I'm here instead of Angela is that she is on vacation. And as vice chair, she has asked me to lead tonight's meeting. So I would like to thank all of you for coming and to welcome all of you to tonight's session. And keeping in line with what Angela typically does, I have a question that you could put your answer in the chat. And the question is, which team are you rooting for in the World Series? And if you don't care, I want to know you don't care. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be great.
Well, wait a minute. This isn't anonymous. You're going to come with a baseball bat after me.
No. Why would I do that, Sue?
Well, what if I say, well, okay. Okay.
Okay. What do we got? Oh, don't care, Philadelphia. NL. Martin, what are you saying?
National League team.
National League.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. A lot of don't cares. Gail, Dusty Baker's Expo, yeah.
So what's the question?
The question is, who are you rooting for in the World Series? And if you don't care, just say you don't care. Because I'm curious about that as well. Everyone should have a chance to respond somehow. Oh, the Astros. I'm rooting for Philly. It is irrelevant, but it's a nice way
No,
of.
that's my take on it. It's irrelevant to me.
Yeah, this is true, but it's kind of a nice way of getting away from the world without having to take a big vacation or something.
Mhm.
It's hardly a World Series when the world doesn't participate.
I know, isn't that ironic, right? Absolutely. Okay, so why don't we start now with our community announcements? Does anyone have anything that they would like to share with the rest of the group? Any events you've gone to, events you want to go to?
We had a huge turnout for the bicycle protest this last Sunday.
Excellent.
Yeah, unfortunately, a guy who had a really amazing six-wheeled bike got it stolen after the event. And I know. I know. And so if you see a bicycle that looks kind of like the Mars rover, you know, report it to Sunnyvale Police Department. And it's all black. And but otherwise it was a marvelous turnout. I think there was at least 100 people there, if not more. We had, it was a good ride. The family of one of the pedestrian victim, the 26-year-old, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it now, had participated with us. And it was a very moving event. And we had one angry driver who didn't like us blocking the intersection of Hendy and Inverness for a grand total of 2 minutes 2 entire minutes we blocked this intersection. And so he was telling us we were disrespectful, but we kindly dropped a flyer in his car.
Mhm.
That's probably better than slashing his tires, Leah.
Yeah, well. So that was the event on Sunday.
Okay,
And
Any
of
other
course,
announcements?
Saturday I spent it decorating a candy cane with you.
Ha ha.
That is true. We did spend some time decorating the candy cane for Livable Sunnyvale. So
There
when
will
it-
be crows on the candy cane.
yes, I did them today.
Oh, good.
We got crows for the candy cane. So I have an announcement. I want to say that we have the Art in the Park, which was in celebration for National Arts and Humanities Month. And that went up mid-October. It's in Washington Park, right by the swim center. I am extremely thankful, as we all are, for the rain, but who knows what our yarn art looks like today. But it should be much different than what it looked like 2 weeks ago. So if you want to swing by there and see it, please do. Any other announcements?
Well, Agnes, can I just ask you about the yarn art? Is that going to stay regardless? I mean, for how long?
So it's scheduled to stay until December 2nd, unless it
Oh.
starts to look really ratty. Then parks will want to take it down. So I'm gonna go by tomorrow to see if it's really ratty. But what we did was we covered benches and lampposts, and Sue participated as well and covered one of our lampposts. So it looked really nice. I was very pleased in the short period of time we had to do it that it turned out so well. Marie,
Yes, I guess I'm off. There's a Unity Solidarity Vigil in Sunnyvale on November 15th. I have the flyer if you want me to share it.
oh, that'd be great.
I'd have to be allowed to share.
Well, Mike can do that for you.
So co-hosting.
And daylight savings times ends this Sunday, or actually, yeah, very early Sunday morning.
Not quite there yet.
Okay,
Okay, got it. All right, let's see. Here it is. All right. So it's a solidarity vigil against hate. And so we've had these rallies and gatherings for a few years now. So you don't have to RSVP, but you do have to show up, and it's at the Sunnyvale Community Center, which sometimes gets confused with Sunnyvale Community Services. So it's not at our place, it's at the Remington Center for Sunnyvale.
Thank you.
Yeah. I could also put a plug in that our auxiliary is having a craft fair and bake sale on Saturday at Murphy
Ooh.
Park from 9:30 to 4:30.
Nice.
Which,
Very important, and the prices are very, very low. And so it's at Murphy Park. All right.
It's at Murphy Park, you said?
Murphy Park, Saturday,
Wow.
9:30 to 4:30. And I will
Okay.
fight anybody over the quilts. We're decorating our office here with quilt hangings from the auxiliary, and they're all mine. So
So it's this weekend?
it's this weekend, Saturday, November 5th from 9:30 to 4:30.
So do you take credit cards for the event?
Yes,
or
we do.
you-
We're in
Oh,
the, yeah,
perfect.
we're in the 21st century. The prices, I do like to say, are kind of set in the 1980s sometime, someplace, but
Nice. Okay, excellent.
all right.
Any more announcements before we have our first speaker presenter? Going
So
well.
Yeah,
I would just
the,
like, oh, sorry.
well, go
Yes,
ahead,
go ahead,
Donna.
Donna.
Go ahead.
So we have just heard some great news. Traditionally, St. Joseph's Church in Mountain View has served Thanksgiving dinner. I think it actually is the week before for all of the homeless, anyone who comes in the whole Bay Area. They had to stop it during COVID, but I've just heard they're doing it. So I'm waiting for the flyer. I will send it to Livable Sunnyvale. We're trying to post it. This is the place where people can come. Most of the other Thanksgiving dinners, like Don Giovanni and all of them, have been, are still on hold, so stay tuned.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
It's not an event, but the Sunnyvale DPS is now giving gun locks for free to residents.
Hmm.
So
How are they getting the word out on that, Mike?
that's a good question. That's a good question. I asked the mayor that question. That was the first thing I said. He said, we're working on it.
Okay,
So I think this is an area where Livable Sunnyvale could certainly help to get the word out. So
Yeah, I didn't see anything on DPS's next door postings about it, so I'm surprised.
yeah,
Since they're
Larry
quite
just
active
sent me
otherwise.
it's on the mayor's Facebook page, but so maybe we'll see it, shortly.
well, the next time you talk to Larry, maybe you should suggest that if some of us want to volunteer and have a table at farmer's market, we could do that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else with any more announcements?
I don't know. You probably all stopped by Diwali celebration a couple weeks ago. It was by all accounts, a huge success in terms of turnout, but I didn't really get to see the crowds. We were tabling inside the community building. So, but we had we tabled there, and that might be something you want to. Well, I'm not sure if you can. Well, I'll look into that and let you know if you can table there. I'm not sure if if it has to be city related or not, because we were doing Livable Sunnyvale. I mean, Leadership Sunnyvale. Oh, those two LSs.
They get you every time, Sue. You should have thought of a different name, for heaven's sakes. All right,
Tell you about the history of that. So,
all right.
about the
going
name. Yeah.
Once, twice. All right, we are going to start with a person most of you know, Sue Cerrone, and as I affectionately call him, her sidekick, Mike. And Sue is our founder, as you know, and she is going to give us some history about Livable Sunnyvale. So the screen is yours.
Well, golly, thank you, Agnes, Vice Chair. Actually, I have to say that Mike did the slides, and he said that I would be very appropriate as someone who might just chime in now and then on these slides. It's a very short presentation, so I thought we were going to do Housing 101, and then I thought I'll do all the slides. I have so much information, and then Mike said, no, that's not what we're looking for. We want to find, yeah. So anyway, here it is, and Mike, take it away.
So, right. So the agenda says Livable Sunnyvale looking back. So this is really kind of a retrospective before we later in the meeting start looking forward. But so just for some background, and I'm sure Sue will be jumping in here frequently, but in around 2014, there was a growing awareness in Sunnyvale and the Bay Area that housing affordability was becoming a major issue. It's a little hard to believe now that short time ago nobody was particularly talking about this in a political way. But when new housing projects came in, there was strong opposition from the public. For reference, just think about Cupertino today as a point of reference. So that's kind of what it was like. So around that time, the Sunnyvale Democratic Club formed an affordable housing committee, which actually attracted more interest than any of our other committees. It was actually, I knew Ganguly, who suggested it at a meeting, who you may have seen at the Diwali festival. and many other things, and the unity meetings as well. So over the next year, the committee put together a number of meetings at the DIM Club to educate ourselves and our community about the housing crisis. And we had a lot of people participate. Adina Levin, who we know from Friends at Caltrain, was introduced to us by Lucas Ramirez, and now the mayor of Mountain View. Marie Bernard came and talked to us. We had forums with Lenny Siegel and from Mountain View, and our VTA rep at the time. It did take some education, because a lot of us didn't know what the issues were there and what the impacts were.
As I recall, just jumping in here, that was the time where Don Veith, Agnes's husband, who has since devoted himself more to gun issues, but Don and I put together an educational, was the original housing 101 kind of presentation. And boy, to do that, we had to learn so much of the, what was on what the actual law was, where you actually found out information about housing. And anyway, one of the controversies at that time was around, and it still is, but we don't hear about it so much, or at least I don't, which is jobs, housing, balance. And this is still a contentious issue if anybody wants to talk about it, and something that we used to some good leverage as advocates. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. So the attendance at the Affordable Housing Committee meetings continued to grow, and a lot of people started coming who weren't members of the DIM Club, not necessarily even Democrats, and people from other organizations. We mentioned Friends of Caltrain, of course, Sunnyvale Cool, Greenbelt Alliance, SB at Home, Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, and a number of others, because they were all working in this area, and we're still working with these same groups. So in 2016, the committee decided to become an independent, nonpartisan advocacy coalition focused on affordable housing in Sunnyvale. And our first name was the Sunnyvale Sustainable and Affordable Living Coalition. Just really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
I can't hear that acronym, that clumsy acronym, without thinking of David Wessel. We can't tell you all the interesting intrigue and battles and crazy stuff that happened. Not all the time, but there were some really, interesting things that happened. Challenges to the bylaws, and we had some people lawyer up, but they never really did anything. And so, it's been an interesting journey. And it's only because most of the people who have hung in there and continue to hang in are passionate about what we're working for. We want affordable housing, and we want a community that's livable, that we can live in. So anyway, yes, I think I'm done for this slide.
So anyway, from then through 2016 and 2017, under Sue's leadership and others, the coalition grew, adding additional partners, providing input for the Peary Park specific plan, the El Camino Real specific plan, and the LUT, the land use and transportation element. The Peary Park came up in front of the council last night again, and they have almost completely used up their allocation for commercial buildings that was established back then, which everybody thought was, this is all we'll ever need. And so they're talking about expanding that, because they still have applications, and they talked about a couple of them last night. So these are all still, and the El Camino Real specific plan which we thought would be soon resolved, and Greenbelt Alliance was very much involved in that, and we held some forums and some public outreach events, and that was just approved this last summer. So some of these things are taking a lot longer than we thought they should. And for jobs, housing balance, I remember, I see John Cordes on here. I remember him advocating for limiting the amount of commercial development in Peary Park specifically, as a way to, you can add housing or you can reduce the jobs, right? But basically, no city council in the country is going to walk away from jobs. It's just kind of the way they operate.
Well,
So,
as if we had control, over the whole economy, which we don't, and which we've had a deficit of housing for decades.
right.
Yeah, right. But I got one piece of gossip, but it's not gossip anymore because it's so long ago. So John Cordes and Larry Klein, we had a lot of different people who are in politics now, who started out with us or tweezed in and out during certain years. Like we had Mason Fong come for a while, and we had lots of different people come for a while. But when we were starting up, John Cordes was one of the regular people who came, and Larry Klein was one of the people who came at the very early times. And Larry said he couldn't come anymore. And I said, well, why? And he said, I can't stand to be with John Cordes. I can't stand it. And so came the first management challenge, but their personalities were so different. And John was a very dominant personality. So anyway.
So by showing up, what we were doing was just standard advocacy, right? Showing up at outreach meetings, commission meetings, council meetings, and so on. And I think along with a lot of other people, we were able to change the nature of the political dialogue in Sunnyvale. And if you go to, again, some of our other neighbors, you see a different dynamic. And particularly we focus on civil dialogue. And I, going back to some old emails, I found this quote from Sue that I definitely have noticed a sea change in housing issues, or at least the feeling that affordable housing is now an important consideration. And now generally in Sunnyvale, even if somebody's speaking against a housing project, they preface their comments with, I know we need a lot more affordable housing. So at least we all agree on that now, or pay lip service to it in some cases. But that's a big difference as opposed to what you may hear in other cities. So we, as fun as that other long name was, in 2018, we changed our name to Livable Sunnyvale, registered the name, created a website, and a committee took on the task of generating our first version of the bylaws with a steering committee or board, and Sue was selected as our first chair. And as I'm sure everybody who's been attending these meetings is aware, we have 3 pillars that we're focused on: affordable housing, of course, sustainability, and transportation, because they're all related, right?
And Mike, I think I'd like to say that this is something these pillars have been stable through all the earthquakes. There has not been any wavering from these 3 principles and categories. And that's because, like you say, they're all interrelated, but they also, to achieve a livable Sunnyvale, we know we have to look at all 3 of these all the time in all the different situations that we're put in. Hey, this looks great, maybe for transportation, but is it sustainable? What materials are they using? What about affordable housing? How we continually need to push for a higher percentage of affordable housing. But anyway, I think this distinguishes us from a lot of groups, advocacy groups, that we take a more holistic view of what has to be done to make the whole thing work out. And I think that is a strength. And that's all
So
I have to say.
here's some, Sue mentioned Housing 101 and she, she has a presentation she gave to a number of different groups. And I remember one at the Silicon, maybe at the time it was called the San Jose Democratic Club. Now it's become the Silicon Valley Democratic Club, but with Cindy Chavez and Sue, and I think Adina Levin was the other.
That's right.
And but some key points that may not seem obvious, but and you still hear these, that certainly that we've been adding jobs for decades, and not adding enough housing. And I'll just here, this is an analysis I did. You can take it with a grain of salt. I just looked at Sunnyvale over time, what the number of jobs or the development supporting these jobs that have been approved versus the number of residential units approved. And this is what the Bay Area looks like. Basically, the jobs just kept going up. And it's generally, there's no public opposition to adding jobs, or you see a little bit of it now, but and it's a lot easier to throw up a big building for jobs. I mean, they're just kind of an open space inside. Residential units are more difficult, and so I just think that's something to be aware of. But so we have a huge deficit we have to make up, and of course this has resulted in increase in housing prices. So many more people are severely burdened by the cost of housing, or they have to commute from the Central Valley. And we keep having to say building more housing does not increase traffic, which you hear all the time, that you're putting housing there, the traffic will go way up. The traffic is coming from people coming from a long ways away, driving through all of our cities, getting to their jobs and back again. It is not coming from a housing development down the street from where they work. And of course, the housing shortage is most severe for low income and extremely low income residents, because those units take subsidy. They're a lot harder to put in place. And here's a list of the things that we have been advocating for. And there's another list later that I think maybe Chuck will be talking about. It's the same, pretty much the same list, right? That we have been and have been advocating for. And the tools we use are educational outreach meetings with the community, candidate forums. We have our monthly meetings like this one, special events with guest speakers, which have been very popular. We've had some well-known authors come and speak specifically about housing and equity issues around housing. We co-sponsor events with our coalition partners. We show up at meetings and provide our public input, and we attend city outreach meetings. So just basic advocacy. So that's our look backwards. So Agnes, back to you.
Well, thank you. But before we take questions with people just raising your hand, there is one in the chat. And the question is, how is sustainability related to affordable housing?
Well, who, do you want to take it? You want me to take it?
Go ahead.
Sustainability is related not only in the materials that are used to build affordable housing, where they come from, the labor that is used to build affordable housing. We also feel that paying a living wage is an aspect of sustainability. So we try and look at all those things when we're thinking about affordable housing, but specifically, Sunnyvale has some pretty good codes for new buildings in terms of the things that you might be thinking of electricity, electrifying most everything. We're still not getting total compliance on developer, as far as I know, getting developers to install all electric. They still want to hold out for a gas stove because they say that the customer demands it. So I don't know how that's going to work out for sure, but we are certainly advocates for going beyond the reach codes and being progressive in all areas of development. But building new homes is the easiest way to make them sustainable. Otherwise, it's retrofit, usually of some sort.
So, and obviously if people are, which many people are having to drive to the Central Valley and back again every day for their job, that's a lot of greenhouse gases being put in the atmosphere. So, you know, that's a big part of it as well.
That's a huge benefit. If people can live closer to where they work, or if they can take transit, not cars, then, you know, that's a huge win. It makes a significant reduction because that's where most of our greenhouse gases are coming from now, is our transportation here.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Mike or Sue? Scott?
Yeah, quick first, Mike and Sue, thanks for the great background. I wasn't around for that history, so I appreciate it. Question, Mike, the great chart on jobs versus housing, kind of what was counted there? How did you develop it?
Well, there are public records of what's been approved, right? So just going back over time and looking at those, and then I had to make certain assumptions, and there are accepted relationships between the square footage of a commercial development and the number of employees that are going to be occupying that.
Okay, so 100,000 square feet divided by some factor equals jobs.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
And on the housing side, are you counting units there or units times X people?
Units, yes, units, housing units.
Okay, so it might actually, I mean, it's still a huge imbalance, but if you assume 2 or 3 people per unit, since
That's
you're
right.
counting jobs, it might be more of an apples to apples.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, and we know some of these even we 2 and 3 people in a bedroom. Yeah, that's certainly true. Yes.
Okay, thanks very much.
Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask Sue or Mike? Okay, going on. Okay, thank you both very much.
Oh, thank you for allowing us to do this.
So now I would like to introduce Marie Bernard, who is the Executive Director for Sunnyvale Community Services, and David Hernandez, who is Chief Programs Officer. Now, I'm not sure, Marie and David, if you would like to add more. That's not much of an introduction, but please feel free to add on. And thank you for coming.
Well, I'll start by saying that we're also joined by Keisha Miller, who's one of our program managers for our safety net services as well. So Keisha's here to add realism to what we're going to talk about. Okay, well, let's see. I'm going to see if I can do this. This is like my 14th Zoom of the day. So let's see how I do on this. All right, I think I've got it here. And I'm going to come back to Zoom and share. Okay. All right, so I'm not sure if, since many of you care about buildings and commercial buildings, this is one of them in Sunnyvale, which we refurbished at 1160 Kern Avenue. It is our new home. It's 36,000 square feet. And if we had gone through the paperwork, it would have been LEED silver, I believe, but we did not want to go through that final paperwork and expense. To refurbish it and renovate it, it took 23 months during COVID. And the building, I can tell you, was a $14 million purchase with a $6 million budget to do the renovations that grew to $8 million over 23 months during COVID. And we paid the prevailing wage because we, like yourselves, want to make sure that we're doing things that are helping people who are in the trades as well as people living here. So we've been around since 1970, and I loved hearing the history of Livable Sunnyvale. Our mission has been very straightforward: to prevent homelessness and hunger. And we're very local. When we moved, we decided to keep our name. So we share our name with you as Sunnyvale. And our vision is one that I think we all share, that everyone has a home with food on their table and that they can manage to live and thrive in the local community. So our goal, and this is one reason why we got this building, was to be a hub, because that's really been missing in Sunnyvale, a place where services can come together. And so we are networked out in the community with many of the government and also partner agencies. And one of them is here today, Donna Perez from Our Daily Bread, and also St. Vincent de Paul. She wears two hats. She's one of our faithful partners and sister agencies here in Sunnyvale, trying to be the safety net, the non-government safety net here in Sunnyvale. So this is a numbers slide. Hopefully you can see this. We just did our analysis of how many people have we helped. Now, Sunnyvale, as you know, has about 155,000 residents. Last year, in white, you see there we helped 10,595 clients. The year before, in our fiscal year, which ends June 30th, we helped 10,492. That sounds like we just helped the same amount of people, but it's a little deceiving on two levels. First of all, not all of those 10,595 people were the same the year before. In fact, our analysis just showed that 21% of them were new, which means that 79% of them went away, did not come back. The other thing we looked at was the consumption or the per capita usage of all of our services in the past year versus the year before. So these are apples to apples comparisons, because I know what you're looking for is what is the pulse of the need and how are we doing in Sunnyvale, especially helping our most vulnerable populations. So a year ago, we helped 7,129 individuals with food and what we call in-kind assistance. That means it might have been toiletries, it might have been a sleeping bag. Year over year, we helped 9,182 individuals. So more people out of the 10,000 and change people in the new mix were helped with food. Move over to the children and the back to school program. Year over year, 2 years ago, and this would have been in 2020, August of 2020, 1,600 children. Last year, 1,765. And this past August, because it just happened, we grew to a whopping 2,160 children were helped with our back to school program. Again, on a base of 10,595. It's financial assistance. The year before, 6,843. This year, 7,800 people. Now, remember, these 2 years cover COVID, the COVID season, which has now been going on for nearly 3 years. And so it's not a COVID, non-COVID. This is a growth in COVID. And by the way, we moved during all of this, and all of you know what it's like to move one way or the other. We didn't miss a beat. We stayed open the entire time during COVID. at our old place and at our new place. We didn't skip one day.
Woo! Woo.
Now,
Awesome.
well, and I'll have and thank you for later as well on that, but the individuals who are homeless, what happened here? 866 the year before, but in this time, then the shelter was sheltering in place. They halved the numbers of beds that were available. Also, as that happened, people were sheltering in place in tents. There was no there was limited amount of ways that people who were homeless could come to us and vice versa. And so the number that we served was still big, 456, but we were not able to go out and proactively work with people the way we normally would have. And also our moving probably affected them the most because how were they going to get from A to B? So that's something that is already starting to tick up, and David can attest to that we are going to have a lot more people we know coming to us who are homeless. And individuals in case management remain flat. The reason is that that's limited by funding. 1 out of 10 people is helped with this wraparound intensive case management. We can't do that for all 10,500 of folks who come, but it's for the most vulnerable, the people who are most at risk, fiscally as well as housing wise. And we throw everything we can at them to help them with wraparound services to help them achieve their goals of self-sufficiency. Homeless individuals in what we call the Work First Sunnyvale program, that's a contract. We're supposed to help 70 a year. And somehow during COVID, we managed to do that. These are all folks who are homeless, working with Downtown Streets team, and it's a contract with the city of Sunnyvale through HUD funding. Individuals with homebound food delivery, God bless Scott, who's one of our homebound delivery volunteers. This is an exciting program. It's also taken off, and I'll show you some numbers later, but the people who were in need of this service has really ballooned during COVID. And we're also finding that a population of seniors is growing and they're more vulnerable. Their income is not going to increase. Their need for food is not going to change. And so we're doing as much customization for those individuals as possible. And finally, our holiday program is not ballooning at the same rate, but it's still going up by about 300. And this year is going to be the same. We just had our Thanksgiving distribution for our families today. We had close to 800 families, I understand, who came just on one day for all of the gift cards and the food. So what we're seeing is an increase in intensity, in the breadth and in the scope and the need of people who are participating in any or all of our programs. David, I wanted to give you the floor to talk about that further.
Yes, so as Marie mentioned, we're getting an increase in. Well, I think another thing to mention is a lot of our families, when they receive assistance, it's not a one-time assistance anymore. Like one-time assistance is enough to get them to self-sufficiency. So we do our best to connect the families in that one point of contact, to connect them to all of our services. And the goal is to get them to return for services that they're going to need on an ongoing basis, like our food and nutrition programs. Right now, what we're experiencing is challenges with, as Marie mentioned, we're contracted, with the county, with other funders to provide financial assistance and case management. As we're transitioning out of this pandemic, a lot of our funders are changing those requirements or those expectations. They're not allowing for Sunnyvale Community Services to assist families on an ongoing basis because they themselves are experiencing, I guess they don't have the money to spread that far anymore. During the pandemic, we were able to help families with about 18 months of rental assistance at 100% of whatever the market, whatever the assistance request was. And I believe that was around, well, Marie will share the numbers later on, but that's a big challenge that we're experiencing right now, that we can no longer provide families with that amount of assistance for longer terms.
Mhm.
So a lot of families that are returning to us, we're having to refer out to other agencies, like St. Vincent de Paul or other community organizations, either in Sunnyvale or around Sunnyvale, to see if they can work with us to do a patchwork to and I still meet the need and prevent the families from experiencing homelessness.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, David. And let me see if this might also show you this is an illustration of the financial assistance that we then pass through to Sunnyvale residents. And I would say that 90 to 95% of what we do is based in Sunnyvale. We do practice what's called no wrong door with some of the funding that might come from federal or state or county funding. But look at what happened in Q1. Our Q1 is July through September. So a year ago, we were dealing with that gold standard from Destination Home. We're one of the biggest homelessness prevention system agencies in the county. And we had to deal with all of the requirements of this funding, as well as the helping the individuals who are coming to us for financial assistance, hundreds of people, and dealing through it with COVID, which meant we were not able to have people come to the inside. We had to have our staff who are working inside slip things through the mail slots and deal with people on the phone. And we had to be extremely creative. And also we had to do all the due diligence of making sure that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed there. But then it drops dramatically, but still the mix is overwhelming in this government funded financial assistance, which we pushed through to Sunnyvale and to the Santa Clara County there. But we have, what's unique is we have over a dozen different forms or sources of financial aid. And when a client comes in the door, we are the matchmakers. We look at what they're eligible to receive. What are they going to be in need of? How long? Have they received funding or help from another source? Who could we patch them in with? Do they need gift cards for something basic, such as a car seat or access to a DMV application so they have an ID? What else do they need? And so this is, but unfortunately, the need is growing. So while the funding was huge, the need is growing in the opposite way. And I think I have a slide here. Okay, this is a slide from the county Destination Home program. Some of you may have seen this. This is, our data is in here. And so the state's eviction moratorium officially expired June 30th, but you had to do a lot of paperwork between March and June in order to continue that. And the need across the county grew exponentially there over the course of, I don't know, exponentially, but several times during the program year. And we're seeing it still going up and to the right as what we're seeing. David has said that we've got a never-ending bucket of 100 or more people on our waiting list. Many of our sister agencies are not keeping a waiting list. They don't even, they're not even attempting to do that. They're just dealing with the folks that they have. And some of them had to shut down their financial assistance programs for weeks at a time because they cannot deal with the flood. We've staffed up. We're carefully doing all this work. We're trying to manage it. Thank goodness we have room. Clients are coming back into the office, which means that they're able to at least talk to somebody face to face. And but the need is going up to the right is the point that I think we want to make sure that people know when this is going to be first-time homeless people. This is going to be families. Those of you who have been able to go to the shelter, and not many of us have been, but in the past couple of months, Rotary's gone to serve dinner. The first night, there were 103 individuals there. 25 were children. The next month, when we went last week, it was 97 people and 20 were children. Normally, we would be doing a lot of work to identify those families with children, because we cannot help everybody, but we have a particular capacity or experience working with families with children if we have funding. And we weren't even able to interface with them until very, very recently when we were allowed to go back in. So I'll go in here. One of the other things that we wanted to let you know about is the TBRA, or the Tenant-Based Rental Assistance, which is a unique program that Sunnyvale has that is not actually part of it's separate from the county funding on TBRA that the Sunnyvale City has awarded to us for a 2-year grant. David, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the tenant-based rental assistance program, the goal is to identify unhoused families or individuals in Sunnyvale that have the potential to transition into permanent housing after participating in this subsidized housing program, where Sunnyvale Community Services will assist them in locating housing, working with landlords who would accept the TBRA, let's call it housing voucher. And then through a year or 2 years of participating in the program, the family will eventually be able to sustain the rent at 100% with limited to no support. Again, the goal is providing intensive case management or wraparound services during their participation to ensure that successful outcome. We, as Marie mentioned, we became the administrators July of this year. Our first quarter was a ramp up quarter. I call it our cleanup quarter to ensure that as we were transitioning administration, landlords and the clients, like Marie said, we didn't skip a beat. Landlords got their subsidies. Clients' housing was not at risk, or all the families currently enrolled in the program were not at risk. That was achieved. We now are in a place in the program where we're actually processing new families to connect them with this voucher and then begin their housing search, and then hopefully move them into housing as quickly as possible. Our goal is to identify families with children. As Marie mentioned, that is our niche, is our interest. No one should be homeless, especially a child. So we're trying to use this resource to create those opportunities for families in Sunnyvale that traditionally would have to be queued up in the county queue, meaning they would have to go through an assessment with a homeless provider, and they would be put on a wait list to eventually one day get that call that they have been selected to participate in a rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing program, and then start that process. So this program allows us to operate outside of that queue and bring Sunnyvale-centric services to unhoused Sunnyvale families and individuals. Again, the goal is to double up. We absorbed the program at 19 households. The goal is to get to 40 housed, previously unhoused households at any given time during the program years.
And one other, we had been for several years doing case management for the people in the program, but not the fiscal administration of it and the landlord liaison work, though we did work with the landlord's default by doing case management. So this really is bringing full circle, bringing both halves of that program together under one vendor, ourselves, and we're thrilled that it is taken off, but this was a lot of work to do. The program, after 2 years of COVID, was a bit in a mess. And so, as it was probably going to happen because of the lack of of communications that everyone was able to have during COVID. So I'm really impressed with how it's been picked up by David and his team. And we're really glad. This is a $2.5 million project in Sunnyvale for 2 years. And so it's a lot to wrap around, but it's hoping, but again, it's helping up to 40 households. And we know that the need is endless, because trying to find housing that folks on their own can be able to afford in 2 years, if they're low income or just coming out of homelessness, is a big, big leap. And so understanding the need for these families to have affordable housing when they're not going to be making tech dollars right away is another reason to underline why we have to do this, to really focus on housing. I want to just show you some things here. So sometimes the best way to appeal to people is to talk about children. So again, looking at our families with children, this is what we've seen just since January. The number of families, households coming to us for food assistance every month has shot up to now 2,900 versus a baseline of 2,000. So that's in 9 months, which is a pretty steep climb to have. And thank goodness we have the capacity right now. We've got 10 times the cooler freezer capacity, and we're using every inch of our new warehouse because of the need for food. And the frequency people are coming, and the amount of food that they need is increasing because they don't have the means to pay their rent, much less buy food at this point. And this is showing that the homebound, and this is again, thanks to our volunteers, has increased. This is going back to January 2021, when we saw, look at that big hockey stick that happened between January and March. And then it's going up steadily so that we're now helping individuals actually it's now 330 individuals as of October who are getting homebound food. So these are folks who are medically at risk or seniors who can't get out. And we do a lot of customization with the food. The families, we know if they're vegan, if they're diabetic, if they need low sodium food, these are customized bags that go out. And then the volunteers are really helping to be the window in to how they're doing, as well as feeding back to our case team whether or not there's other needs that folks have. Sadly, a lot of these folks do need more support. Some of them are already in our case management system as well. So they're part of the 1,000 or so in case management. Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, this is, we want you all to come and help us. We have great fun opportunities for volunteering, and we now have room to pack a lot of bags. So please advertise that. But again, the case management is really where we wish we could do more. This takes a lot of people and a lot of money because it's staff time and it's putting resources out there, usually a lot of financial aid coupled with us reaching out to everybody that we can to help the individuals to remove barriers, to solve problems, to connect them to resources that they're entitled to receive. So again, let's see, we were forecasting, and the big building was part of this, that we might grow to almost 13,000 people in a couple of years. We don't know if, based on what we now have seen year over year, if it's the intensity that's going to continue to grow and or the number of people. We're pretty sure the intensity of the need is going to grow. If it also happens that more and more people are in need, it's going to really be a real crushing requirement for funding as well as for resources. So you were asking a little bit about what we're seeing, and these are what we know now. So I mentioned before that 21% of the people we served last year were new clients. So where did everybody else go? And in fact, 48%, nearly half, were new since 2019, since the start of the pandemic. So what we're seeing is some SCS clients are not coming back for services. They've moved, they've lost their phone service, they became homeless, they've had illness. We don't know because we can't reach them if we don't have a valid phone number or email address for them. But we do definitely try to reach out, but many people who are low income change their phones, if they have one, every 6 months for a new service. We're also helping people move away. And David, you may want to speak to that.
Well, as you all know, there is no longer an eviction moratorium that provides that safety net for families who are bouncing back after the negative impacts of the pandemic. Landlords now have free range to move forward with evictions, the 30, 60-day notice. So a lot of our families are aware, that they're self-aware very self-aware that even with assistance from organizations like ourselves, it's a short-term assistance, and they cannot continue to live in this community because of the affordability. So they're being proactive. They are looking to other affordable communities to transition their families to, although they're still commuting, even if they move to the Central Valley, they will continue to commute to Sunnyvale, Mountain View, where they could still take that income to their new homes. So we're getting an increase in requests for that relocation support. So families who are approaching us are asking for deposit, rental assistance, utility deposits, and transportation assistance like gas or U-Hauls or things like that to facilitate those movements into more affordable communities.
And these are real stories. They're the number that we're helping to move out of the area is going up. And what is heartbreaking is that they're having to commute, just like Mike Cerrone talked about before. And so it's not healthy for them in every way, and it's not healthy for all of us. Cars become the next thing people will spend money on. They will forego buying food to fix their car so they can get to work. The stories that we hear of what people's trade-offs are because of the ridiculous cost of housing here and everything else is heartbreaking and very sobering for all of us right now. The number of seniors, again, I mentioned, is growing, and also the percentage of people who are moving, who are using or needing more food. But another indicator we just saw was the enrollment in the Sunnyvale School District, which is the K-8. So the number is declining at what they call a slow and steady pace. So year over year, they've gone from 5456 to 5386. And that says that some children are not here anymore. But the level of basic needs in schools is slowly increasing. An indicator is the number of students who qualify for the McKinney-Vento Act, which helps supports students who are homeless. Last year, they had 47 the entire year. So far this year, in just a couple of months, they have 48. So this is an early warning canary in the coal mine for the school district, because they said they see this trend. They saw it from the first day the kids showed up at school. And the teachers and the principals were saying, oh my gosh, we know this child is living in a car, is clearly not stably housed. And we're trying to figure out how we can work with them, because anything that we do, of course, takes people and money, and we're constantly doing these trade-offs. So I showed this to you before. One of the things I wanted to show you is that San Jose is, this is not our slides, these are the slides from the program we're in, homelessness prevention system, that's countywide under Destination Home. But we are the Sunnyvale player there, and San Jose is, of course, the big place where there's a huge amount of need, especially in the East San Jose zip codes. But Sunnyvale is right there as the second largest consumer. And this is us pushing the money through to the families who had to qualify as in need, low income, meeting all the criteria. And there's the myth that there's not a lot of poverty in Sunnyvale. And I know you know it's not true. And we live that every day. The other thing that is a shock, and some of you may have seen this, I'm not sure if you did, but our numbers are in here, and which is the heartbreaking part of it. So severe rent burdens means how much of your take-home pay do you have, how much of your salary do you have to spend in order to pay rent? And this is the math problem that doesn't work. So 56% of the people, and this is, I believe, over 2,000 households in the last year, were burdened with more than their pay to pay their rent, which is why they had to get help. This is a COVID time period, so it's a bad example of maybe a robust economy. But what we know is this was happening before. It may not have been 56%, but time after time, people were coming to us and their rent was, if not 100%, then 90% of their pay. And again, they were sacrificing everything to stay housed. That's the one thing that we know. It's housing is the most precious thing that people will do whatever they can to keep a hold of. Also, the average rent in this countywide number was $1,774 a month, which doesn't go very far. The average rent in Sunnyvale is now well over $3,000 as I last looked at it. So this is I'm preaching to the choir here, but we are in the short term, we're an emergency assistance agency. That's what we're called. As David described, we've been helping some folks for 18 months. Some of our clients have been our food program clients for years. So there's a systemic problem here. We're doing our best to try to be this hub and to connect people to whatever we can. The TBRA program is, again, a wonderful new source that we have. We are trying to screen and enroll people in benefits. SSA is asking us now to do more help to get people enrolled in benefits, because for 3 years we weren't able to get that much assistance to do that. But what do we do is long-term in the community? So we've been in the trenches doing the finger in the dike. We're the ER. Okay, and I view Livable Sunnyvale as a place and a collection of people who are trying to look at, well, what are the causes and how can you go upstream? So I think there's a partnership here. We absolutely, push a button, we will always sing for the need for more housing, more extremely low income housing. We also are obviously always asking for help to solve the result of not having enough housing. So we're constantly going and begging for money from the city, from the county, from the state, from the federal government. We're very fluent in HUD. We've been audited by HUD many times, and managed to safely navigate that. But we're asked to deal with the results of the problem. And then we really are trying to sing the song of also needing more safe shelters. I'm thrilled that the city is going to be hiring somebody to be a homeless services person, to be the hub for homeless services in our city. That's something we suggested years ago, and I'm so glad that one of the council members made it their issue, and it's now their idea and they're going with it, and it should work very well. We also know that there's a lot of bias, and we do our best to represent the need for people to have no barriers for housing. All of these things are the causes as well as the upstream problems. And we definitely want to partner here. So this is the problem. We are caught as ourselves in the left side. We're constantly in the short term, let's fix this immediate problem. And the game for the long range planning, the long range impact is something that is going to take a lot of effort. The other thing is that folks have said, Marie, what's your 5-year plan? And if I had had one, I would have torn it up, because 5 years ago, who would have predicted? We actually did have a 5-year plan, and it expired during COVID, and it looked nothing like what we had predicted, of course. So with that, I will turn it over to David and Keisha to add and say what's their truisms about what we're seeing here in Sunnyvale.
Keisha?
As you all can see, the need continues to grow. Every time we think we're in that bowl of water, that pit of water, that every time we think we're right at the getting ready to be able to breathe, more clients come in with the same need. I would hope that one day we would get to a point where things would start to get a little bit better, but I'm not seeing that anytime soon. We're dealing with clients that are coming in that have been homeless for the first time. I just dealt with a lady the other day who basically was ashamed of being homeless. She didn't want to participate in our resource fair at first because she had nowhere to go. So she was afraid of the fact that she hadn't been able to take a shower. Her daughter hadn't been able to take a shower and wash her hair, but she was getting ready to start school. And I told her, you can't have your daughter start school and not have a backpack, not have the materials that she needs. She has to come to this fair, get her face painted, do all those wonderful fun games we had at our resource fair. And so when she got there, I made sure she had everything that she needed. I gave her extra supplies to be able to take that shower. It overwhelmed me to have her break down and cry standing right there and saying that, do you mind if I use the gift cards that you gave me to buy detergent, because we haven't been able to wash our clothes in a couple months and my daughter's about to start school. I want her to at least be clean if I can't give her new clothes. It was super overwhelming. And she was like, this is the first time she thinks we're camping because we're sleeping in a tent. So for the summer, her daughter was under the impression that they were camping when they were really homeless.
Mm.
And we're continuing to have families coming in like that have just given up. They can't pay their rent anymore. Their landlord is coming and saying, you know, I've tried to work with you. I've done payment plans that you haven't been able to keep up with. I'm done. And so they get their eviction notices, and instead of trying to work through it or find legal counsel, they just freak out, drop everything, pack whatever they can, and take off. So the hope is that one day people don't feel like that anymore. But for now, we continue to reassure and do the best we can to assist anyone who walks through our doors. David?
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I could, get lost in the tidal wave of need, but I always look like forward thinking and, highlight the positives. I'm really excited that as an organization, we are transitioning out of this shelter in place that really limited us and put us in a place where we were at points unreachable by our community. We are now able to dive into spaces that we weren't able to be in before. We are now partnering with our local partner organizations once again and having a physical presence, because that's what matters, being there, being fully present and being accessible to those people who are experiencing a crisis. So we're ramping up our satellite offices, our Daily Bread being one of them, Columbia Neighborhood Center, the Senior Center. Today was our first day at the North County Shelter, so we had some awesome interactions with individuals and families who are looking to transition, have a lot of hopes and dreams, and are doing what they can. And they just need to know that resources in the community exist. So I'm really glad that we're now able to rejoin the community and work past our physical four walls. And then also just working with, there's a lot of momentum around homelessness services here in Sunnyvale. As you all know, Home First is now not only operating the North County Shelter here in Sunnyvale, but they now have an outreach arm here in Sunnyvale, which we actually met the team today, Keisha and I, and we were able to educate them on all of the services that Sunnyvale Community Services is able to provide to the people they are connecting to at this encampment. Their eyes were just wide open with excitement. They were super excited about, the possibilities because they're coming from communities around us that don't have these resources as readily available as the city of Sunnyvale or Sunnyvale Community Services. And we're just excited to work with our Helping Hands too, was also here last week. And yeah, so I try to focus on that and in that kind of give the voice back to the clients. Our goal, and I tell this to Marie all the time, our purpose is not to speak on clients' experiences. Our goal, or at least my team's goal, is to create a space where these individuals and families can speak for themselves on their experiences, because I feel like that will be more impactful. And I can't be someone else's voice, but I could definitely help, or we can definitely create a space where we can elevate that voice. So I'm really excited about what the city, what this community, Sunnyvale, is doing for its residents, for its neighbors, housed or unhoused. So I'm really looking forward to just exploring more opportunities to strengthen those collaborations and create a livable community for everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. Sue and Mike, I was super impressed with your presentation. I did not even know that Livable Sunnyvale went back that far. So thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Agnes, one of the things I wanted to check in with you on is I was able to finally get a copy of the pit count for Sunnyvale, which was a little bit difficult to get. And hopefully I don't know if you've seen that already. We can't hear you.
Think I'd learned that by now. Thanks, Marie. Ryan Dyson, for those of you who don't know, works for the city. And he had sent it to me last week, and I thought I may have forwarded to you. Maybe I forgot to, but I did get it. And it was surprising that the numbers were so low.
I've got it right here. So let's see if we can share this. So we have some ideas about this. So if you look down the city of Sunnyvale, it's been all over the map over the years. So it was very low in even before 2019 and 2017. So it bounced up to 2019, 624. And it went down this last year to 385. That's the last number there. And so David and I were philosophizing about this a bit. One thing that changed was the number of people in the shelter, which is one count, and also the number of people who cycled through the shelter. Because if they are allowed to stay for more than 90 days, that meant that other people were not necessarily coming to the Sunnyvale area to try to get services from the shelter, because they are a home base for all sorts of services. And also this count, and I was a little surprised at the fact that we think that our volunteers, and some of you were on that count, that our volunteers in Sunnyvale went down every street, but we couldn't get out of the cars and go into the encampments this time because of the continued shelter in place. So it was, if you saw a tent, it was one person in the tent. If you saw a car, it was one person in the car. And so likely it was an undercount overall. I don't know why Milpitas went up by 119%, but on a lower base. So these are always fraught with problems. I was on the count personally, but we made sure that in Sunnyvale, every street was covered.
If I can, Marie, if I can add also, this was during COVID, so keep in mind that the city or the county was also operating COVID motels. So a lot of the families who were traditionally or unhoused in Sunnyvale were relocated to outside of Sunnyvale through the COVID motel program, or through that program. But as that funding was coming to an end and people were exiting out of those programs, they weren't housed yet, and they were returning to their community of origin, which in this case would have been Sunnyvale. So, and again, also, this is a point in time. So, that could have been a bad Wednesday for, our volunteers counting, and, we just go around the community and count heads. We don't engage. That's not allowed, especially during COVID. So take it with a grain of salt, that this may not be, a true representation of our unhoused community in Sunnyvale.
And David, just to add to that, in the past, before COVID, there were stricter rules in Sunnyvale about having your vehicle and sleeping in your vehicle across Sunnyvale. And so subsequent to COVID, after COVID, I know many of the diners at Our Daily Bread had found places that they felt safe, and they were alone there, wherever it may be. And I've never seen more diners telling me they're sleeping all over the city and they're left alone. And so I don't think that count, in my mind, and this is purely from what they tell me, is anywhere close. I've never seen more people tell me they're sleeping in their cars.
Well, the reason that I was so surprised by this count is I have seen more people unhoused in our community in the last few months than I have seen in the 25 years I have lived here. And my fear with this count is that the easy way of looking at this is, oh, well, look, it's gone down. We don't have a problem. And I'm fearful that that mindset will set in based on these numbers.
Yes, and my fear on top of that is that this count informs funding streams and funding availability for communities in Santa Clara County. So if I were, the county official making a decision of where I'm going to allocate, funding for homeless resources, the ones that have jumped 191% were probably the first ones I hone in on, and the ones that seem that are dropping or declining in percentage would be at the bottom of the list. So that's another risk with accepting these counts as truth.
Yeah.
It's really hard to know. Exactly. I mean, having participated in this, I know there was as much rigor as we could give to it. We made sure we had lots of caffeinated volunteers who started at our agency. We were the home base for it at 4 or 4:30 in the morning. And we had people who were homeless on the counts with us who knew where to look. But it was not like the last few times I've done the pit count where you could, you driving down alleyways and doing a much more thorough evaluation of evidence of people homeless. It was also done in, was it March? I think it was postponed to March. And things have changed since then. I would agree that the evidence, and the city manager, Ken Steffen, said, Marie, I'm hearing about it every day. And so we don't know if the wave of people are coming back. People will return. They know our Daily Bread has great meals. And so why would they not want to come back if they know that the resources in the community here?
Yeah, and we also, another thing that we did, we collaborated with the city, the county, Home First to operate like an emergency motel for the Fair Oaks. We talked to, our outreach team over Home First was sharing with us that they're having a difficult time engaging with, so that program attracted unhoused individuals into Sunnyvale who are now encamped in local parks, outside the library and so forth. And what engagement is hard because some of the unhoused individuals or families like, well, I'm just gonna sit here until I'm moved into a motel, like the families at Fair Oaks were. So that's another, variable there.
So I think the real message for Livable Sunnyvale is, can we really advocate for a diverse solution of safe parking? I mean, there's no one solution. I know so many homeless that will not go to the shelter. It's for whatever reason, it's not right for them, their mental state. Tiny houses, they talk about transitional housing, and I have had so many homeless say to me, I went into transitional housing, and after 3 months, there was nothing to transition to. And I know, David, you've probably experienced some of that. If the housing is short for working people, it's really going to be short for people that don't have an income and maybe have a background or whatever. So we have some big challenges. And I just want to say, I'm going to sign off here. It's a big shout out. Sunnyvale Community Services is remarkable. I work all over the county with St. Vincent de Paul, and I don't think there's a group that's as effective as this group. So they are doing so much for the population in Sunnyvale. And I really, any word we can get out to support them, we really need to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Donna. And so this is a lot of what Donna just said was, it takes a solution, and this has to be a long-term community commitment here. We are busy in the trenches, and so sometimes I'm asked, Marie, get out there and fight for this. And I did not read the 400 pages of all of the housing that was approved or gone through by the Housing and Human Services Commission. God bless the commissioners for doing that. Thank goodness you are doing it because we can't, we don't have the time. But we also want to have a voice at the table to do that in a way when we're already bailing the water out of the boat. And get that so that, as David said, the voice of the people being affected, the voice of that woman who just became homeless. And, these are Sunnyvalians who are going to become homeless, who have become homeless, or people who for 20 years have been in Sunnyvale, whether or not they've been living in the car or the park. These are Sunnyvale residents. And I think there's a power here. The state has finally passed, thank goodness, laws that make it harder to resist housing. And I know you folks are all over that. What can we do to get some more of the voice out here to have, we're building what we call our community navigators or promotores program. Those folks should be at the dais talking about the need for housing to offset the people who say not in my backyard. There is an underbelly of fear, as well as, I will call it, hate, that we've seen. Many of you were at a meeting about 6 or 7 years ago when there was when the North County shelter was being debated at Not the Right Place on California. And we saw ugliness that I never thought I would see in Sunnyvale, of people telling homeless people to their face, I'm going to give you a blankety blank bus ticket so you can go to Arizona and get out of here. Leave. You don't belong here. And that was said to four tiers of duty Air Force veteran who was homeless for many years and was finally housed. And he faced that so the hate is there, and I don't like to see it, but we have to counter it, because we have to touch the hearts of people who maybe are a little bit afraid or don't want to give up part of their lawn in order to share in our community.
You only have to look on Nextdoor to see the comments about the unhoused that are so negative all the time.
Yeah. So I wish that they could have met the woman that Keisha talked about.
Yeah, one of the other things that I think about, in addition to my fear for the numbers that we've talked about, is that there's a misconception of people that are unhoused. And what Keisha said, I mean, this woman is not what some people think would be the quote typical unhoused.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is part of the word that we need to get out, is the truth about who is affected in this area. And I think I'm sure there's a lot of things that we could do. And I know that all of our members would like to do something, because we realize this is an untenable situation. It's not fair. And it's just, it's not how you treat people.
Mm-hmm.
So you're muted if you're trying to say something.
Now I forgot what I wanted to ask. Darn it.
I wonder, I know, Marie, you and Keisha and David are all extremely busy, but I wonder if it would be helpful if you could spare some time, if some of us sat down outside this meeting with you and see what we can do and bring back to our membership how we could help in the short term and in the long term.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I was just going to say, this is a long way off, but the poverty simulation destination home usually, I think, takes the
No, it's Downtown Streets team and ourselves. So
downtown streets team,
yeah.
and you.
It's going to be at our place this time.
Oh, wow.
We're
Okay.
doing our new building. Yeah.
And it's usually what, February or
I'll tell you when it will be. And that's a good point of inviting all the city council members to partake in it if they haven't already. one of my favorite memories is when then Mayor Spitaleri was participating, and he kind of, he's a gruff guy. Well, his family became evicted in round 3 of the 4 rounds of game. And you're evicted when your chairs are turned upside down and you have no place to sit. So he's standing there in the middle of the gym at Sunnyvale Presbyterian going, what happened? How did this happen? I don't know how this happened. And we have to do something about this. So God bless him.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
A lot
so
of people
I'll
have said
send you
it's
the note
life-
about that.
yeah.
So everybody promote it and go if you haven't gone, or if you haven't gone in a long time.
It's February 10th in the
Great.
morning on Friday.
And Agnes, as a response to your question, I don't know what David or Marie's schedules look like, but I would be more than happy to sit down and talk with you guys.
Excellent, excellent. So should I work through, can you put your email in the chat?
Yeah.
And then I can coordinate a time for some of us to sit down with you, because I think that would be a logical next step to this conversation. Okay. Does
I think
anyone have?
that
sorry,
would
go
be
ahead,
powerful
Marie.
because we are, as David mentioned, there's been a lot of meetings. There was meetings about the homeless situation that have been convened by Otto Lee and others. And we just have found that it's easier or better for us. David has had these in-depth meetings, days spent with our sister agencies so that we can get to know them and vice versa. So today was Home First Day. And the last week was Helping Hands Day.
Yes.
And everything is just bubbling like popcorn, taking off like that.
Yes.
Well, I would want this to, yeah, I will contact you, Keisha, and see what we can do to set something up and see what we can do to do something concrete and not just sit and talk. I mean, we certainly have members that we can reach out to as well. And there's a lot of people that I am sure in my heart of hearts would want to help. Just knowing what to do is going to be extremely important. So thank you. Did anybody have any questions for anyone that's been speaking tonight before we move on?
Can you hear me, Agnes?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. I wanted to ask Marie if the data she has includes a breakdown of the senior population involved in terms of just that age group.
Now you're muted, Marie. God,
My mouse got lost. I hate it when it does that. David can speak to that, I think, as well, but the number of people who are seniors in our programs is creeping up as a percentage. And again, if you think of the fact that we lost 400 folks or so in the homeless population that we served in last year's numbers, that was substituting out for other folks, and seniors I know is growing, but also again, the intensity. David, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and we could definitely follow up with more data on what that bigger number, the breakdown of families and children and our senior group. And as Marie mentioned, we just this whole being sheltered in place has also limited us from connecting with our senior population. And as they're transitioning, we weren't there to help them transition into our senior programming. So that's something that we're looking to clean up. Something to button up now that we have more of a presence outside, as I said, outside of our physical walls.
Well, it sounds like you have plenty of work to do.
Yes, yes, and we have a lot of our seniors, I would say, I don't know the number, are dependent on their children, adult children, to drive them over to SCS, help them participate in our programming. And that's a challenge now with their adult children being no longer having that remote option and going back to work, which limits their ability to come to our agency between 9 to 5, which is why our homebound program is also included. Their children call us, help their parents complete our applications because they know as much as they want to, you know, they have to go out and help pay the bills, and they don't want their parents to go without, you know, the resource. So there's a lot of things that impact that. So we can follow up with more data.
Yeah, my thought was that if we could arm ourselves with data about how fast Sunnyvale is aging within the county. We can do county data too, but specifically Sunnyvale, how fast are we aging in Sunnyvale, and what's our projected actual numbers, and how many have been seeking community services and that sort of thing, that we could get some a coalition probably of a whole new group of people if we can activate our senior citizens about that issue. So.
And, you know, as Marie mentioned, connecting with Home First and just going into the shelter, you'll see that there's a great percentage of the existing or the current guests who are seniors, who are on walkers, who need medical, you know, beds, and so forth. We just connected with a family today who shared with us the need for a walker because one of the wheels had broken off, fallen, hit her face, fractured her face, and was still trying to function on a broken walker, and was homeless on top of that. So we were able to then connect her, and we're going to purchase her a walker. But just if you want to see it like real time, the data is the data, but if you want to see it, you know, like I would say in your face, but just ask if you could visit the shelter, and you'll see just how the seniors are being proportionally impacted by, you know, the housing crisis here in our county.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you.
I have another favor to ask. We are trying to build our own capacity in our spare time for looking at for being a true ally and advocate, and to enable to be a place where our clients can have a voice. And you folks you've got, since 2014, you've cut your teeth on advocacy on an area that is very much needed by the population we serve. So I would like to get to a point where our navigators and promotorists can get involved with Livable Sunnyvale to learn how to speak in front of the city council. I mean, the city council, you know, they see me and they run, but but our capacity to do that, I really think that you could be an immense amount of mentors and coaches and cheerleaders for the folks who do need to have their own voice. And it's scary, as you all know. You've all done this. I've seen you on the council meetings. You know how intimidating it is the first time you go up there and you have to speak in front of the dais or speak online. And we'd welcome that solidarity and that partnership and that training, because you somehow eke out the time to do all of this yourselves. And you know, we can potentially be a chorus as opposed to one voice and another voice.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Marie. We could find and identify the individuals who have this interest in advocacy and elevating their voice, who are Sunnyvale residents, are being impacted real time by the housing crisis and every other crisis that we're experiencing. But as Marie mentioned, we're needed in the trenches, so we can bring them up, but then we have to jump back into the deep end and bring more people out. So if we can pair, you know, these community members with experts in advocacy, mentors, to help, you know, grow the coalition, and have, you know, the lived experience voice in these groups, that would be amazing. But we can't do it all.
Yeah, that would be great. We've said for a long time, too often we are as advocates, we're speaking on behalf of various groups rather than hearing from them directly. So that would be great to get more involvement and more real stories going directly to the people making the decisions.
This is definitely something that we can learn more about when we sit down and talk with you. This would be this. I want to say thank you for coming, but it's been so sobering. I wish you would have said no. Because I mean, it is very sobering. Julia, you had a question?
Well, thank you, Marie and David and Keisha, for a great presentation. I learned a lot from you. I agree that we need to do more, talking to each other and, figuring out what we can do of longer term and bigger picture and all that. But for the sake of sending out, because after this meeting, we're going to send out information to our members, link to this recording and all that. I wanted to ask specifically things that you already know that, people like our members or in our mailing list might be able to help with. I heard a couple of things. One is bagging groceries, right? And one is delivering food for homebound folks, right? There was something else I also thought, okay, I'm going to mention the poverty simulation session on February 10th. What else would you like to go out in this, email?
Our follow-up meeting
All right.
email.
Yeah. You got it, Marie? I can't hear you.
My mouse needs to get charged. I would say that we would like to meet but in particular, we're looking to see whether or not people in Livable Sunnyvale might want to consider being mentors for individuals with lived experience. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay,
that makes sense.
all right.
Marie, did you want possibly to include our campaign for holiday and also our open house events?
Are you in fundraising by any chance?
I am not, so I'm
I'll send
giving
you the link. We are
Yes.
having an open house on Giving Tuesday, so we're twinning two things. Giving Tuesday is International Day of Giving. We decided we have a new place. We're having an open house on November 29th from 3 to 7 o'clock, and I'll send out that to, should I send that to you, Julia? Or to,
Yes,
okay, I'll send out a
Well,
few things.
anybody you have for our email. If you
Okay,
don't have mine, maybe you have Agnes.
okay, good. And I can probably put some links in the chat as well, if I can figure out.
So
how to-
Marie, what do you think about this group advocating for more? I know they already are doing it, but safe parking, more alternatives to housing. I mean, they're not short-term, but
Yeah. So-
Well, if we can add muscle to your already distinct voice in that, perhaps we've been a missing piece of the puzzle to drown out some of the people saying no. And we have to ride the wave of the fact that now the state has removed some of the ways that people can go against housing, by removing a number of the barriers. So if we come out, it might be scary to the council members and others to think that Livable Sunnyvale and Sunnyvale Community Services are now a cohort or a coalition. But I think there'd be a lot of power there. So yes, absolutely, Don. I mean, because this is what we need. David has said it, that, after 2 years, if someone's not increasing their income enough, how are they going to continue, even if they were in that tenant-based rental assistance? I mean, we want a success there, and we don't know how they're going to manage it.
Yeah, I think we could be advocates for the need of those alternative housing options. I would just add, the success rate would be probably determined by the supportive services
Yes.
coupled with like that physical space, that safe place. that's the way we'll get people to transition as quickly as possible to permanent, stable, affordable, and safe housing.
One of the things, Donna, that Chuck is going to show in the next segment of our meeting tonight are the issues that we are looking at, one of which is safe parking. So, but I think it's much more powerful to have a voice behind that rather than just us talking about it. Absolutely much more powerful.
It's worth mentioning that we're going to have a new city council the first of the year, and some policy alternatives that may have been considered dead may come back to life. So
one of those was the property tax that didn't make it and was not well understood.
that
Probably wasn't
transfer-
fully baked. I don't think it was fully baked. I know, Mike, you came out in favor of it,
Yeah.
as did I, but at the same time, we missed an opportunity for another 2 years to do
Yeah.
anything, to try to increase some flexible money. Because so many times things come forward and there's no money for it, or else it's made a study issue, and by the time it's studied, it is a moot point.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
we can arm Scott with a lot of things for the Housing and Human Services Commission for study issues, and then be your studiers for it.
I think actually I heard today that the city of Oakland is seriously considering exactly what we didn't get on the ballot.
Yeah.
So we once again missed an opportunity. So,
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm thankful for Keisha and David. One of the things that is needed is for people who don't look like me to be the voices. So I'll do whatever I can to be the megaphone, but I want the voice to be the folks who are really true. And Keisha and David are in the trenches, as they said, every day. Many of us have lived experience, including myself, but it has to be the Sunnyvale experience, the voice of people going through it now, that has to be the loudest and the most paid attention to. And it breaks my heart when I see people go up and they say no, 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 not, protect the tree, but what about the person? So
yeah, it's disconcerting to hear some people that are in leadership roles in our city say we have no housing crisis. We have a housing problem, which is quite the opposite, I think, what most of us see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, praise them for what they've done. I know that that's one thing that works. So say that's it and go off and do it 10 times again. So
Yes, exactly.
but
Exactly.
I think that I admire anybody who reads all those papers and the reports, and it's not an easy task to be a council member or on a commission or anything else at our city right now. You have to go through reams and reams of information and gobbledygook legal stuff, and meanwhile we're trying to be the human touch there. Though I would put our staff for doing paperwork better than anybody. I mean, considering that we did just get audited by HUD again. Again.
Oh,
So I was like, all right, just line them up, we'll do it whenever it is. So
Okay,
right,
well,
we should let you get on with the rest of your meeting, and I think I'm still at the office. You're not at the office, David. Okay, that's good. Neither are you, Keisha, but the alarm goes on at 9 o'clock, so I better get out of here.
well, thank you all for coming. And as I said, it was hard to listen to, but it's something that we all need to know. So thank you very much for taking your time. And thank you for the work you do as well.
Well, and vice versa, we're admiring your advocacy, Chomps. You've got it. So I did put our event in the chat. So that link is there, okay? Thank you all. And
Thank you so
I think
much.
I'm officially a member, but I never get to go. So,
Thank you all very much.
bye-bye.
Well, So now moving on to the next phase of our meeting is Chuck and I had put together as chairs of what we're calling now the Housing Committee. We're not calling it the Housing Element Committee anymore, although we'll be following that for the next 8 years. We have some things that we want to share with you that are what we look at as issues going forward, and we'd like to get your feedback. I know that it's late, but we'd really like you to hear what we think we want to be working on and see what you think about that as an organization. So Chuck, do you want to show the slides?
Yeah, let me share my screen. So yeah, so like Agnes said, we put together a list of kind of the things in the near term that we're working on and things that are we think we'll be seeing over the next year. Part of the motivation for this is the board's going to be doing a planning session to plan out what we're doing for the next year, and we wanted to open this up to everyone to find out what are people interested in, what do you think Livable Sunnyvale should be doing over the next year, what are the things you'd like to learn more about. And to start that, we heard from Sunnyvale Community Services about a bunch of the issues in the community. And we also wanted to bring up, these are the other things that we're working on right now or in the near future. And so this is the list. So like the first three, Mike had mentioned these earlier. These are the big things the city is working on: the housing element, Moffett Park, village centers. We've had a lot of meetings on this. The housing element, the city's planning on submitting a new one in February. So we're following that. Moffett Park, hopefully the draft is going to be out sometime this month. We can start looking at that. The village center plan, we're not too sure the timeline on that, but likely sometime next year, that'll really kick into gear. Then beyond that, warming centers. So this came up at the city council meeting a week or two ago, implementing a warming center in Sunnyvale. Safe parking has come up a number of times in the conversation already. The city's actually looking at, they're not implementing an actual safe parking program, but they are working on a framework for implementing safe parking. So regulations and policies around how safe parking could be implemented in Sunnyvale. And that's on track for the city to look at in the spring. As mentioned earlier, the city's also looking at a full-time city staff to support the unhoused, programs that they're looking at. So advocating really to get more people involved in that. The city's actually going to be starting a universal basic income project. So it's very early on right now. They're just starting the RFP process, but that's something we want to keep track of and be involved with as that develops. Gun safety, as Mike brought up, there's a lot of issues around gun safety that came up over the summer, and the city's going to start looking at that we want to be involved with. And then a few more, there's some renter protections that the city was looking at: a right to lease ordinance and a relocation assistance ordinance. They were supposed to come up before council a number of weeks ago, but they've been indefinitely postponed. So as those come back, we'll be involved with those. And then kind of on some non-housing related issues, there's been 3 different cyclist and pedestrian fatalities over the past month or so in Sunnyvale. So that's becoming an issue that a lot of people are advocating for and want the city to improve the safety for cyclists and pedestrians. One of the specific items related to that is the homestead bike lanes. There was a proposal that came up before BPAC about getting full-time bike lanes on Homestead. So that's an important topic. And then last, back to housing related things, the city's going to be working on an ADU toolkit. How do you get more ADUs built? Kind of easy ways that, and kind of step-by-step instructions people could follow to implement, to build ADUs on their property if they wanted to. But we'd like to see that brought in a little bit earlier. The city's not going to be looking at that for a couple of years. So those are the things that are kind of on our radar right now. We wanted to kind of get people's feedback on our particular items that we've been talking about, are they particularly interesting? You'd like to learn more about them? Are there other things that you're not as interested in? Or are there things that we haven't been talking about at all that you think are really important and that as an organization we should be looking at? And with that, I'll turn it back over to Agnes. Except you're on mute still.
I know. God. Okay, once again, does anybody have anything that they would like to bring up in regard to the list that Chuck has shared? We can send this out also as a follow-up to our meeting, so you have a sense of some of the things we're looking at. Did anybody want to comment on that list or have something that's not on there that you think is important to you?
So I have a question
Oh, I'm
about the
sorry.
universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
I have to believe that's a bit larger than Sunnyvale.
It actually first started in Stockton in, I think, 2019. They are looking at implementing it in Mountain View. And what we know about it is that it's typically funded privately.
I've seen what Mountain View is doing. They're going to
Uh-huh.
give people so much income that are at the lower level.
Mm-hmm.
It's not totally clear to me how it's funded, but okay, I understand now what you're trying to cover. I
Yeah.
guess it would have to come from Sunnyvale funds.
Well, I would hope that it would come from some of our large employers in Sunnyvale,
Okay,
but I don't know. We had a conversation with Jenny, who works in the housing branch of our city, and that's what she was telling us, that it's typically private funded. Chuck, is
Okay.
there something you wanted to add on that?
No,
you
yeah.
recall?
That was one of the things kind of when we were talking with the city, is they raised the issue that they need to find money for it. So right now they're just looking for a consultant that would actually manage it. And presumably it'd be a project similar to what Mountain View is doing, but they don't have funding for it right now. So that's something that they may need kind of assistance and outreach in trying to find sources of funding for that.
And hopefully we will find and get an answer to all of this before the need goes away, because we all know how slowly things go. Kat, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I do. I have two things actually. So on the UBI front, I'd also just point out South San Francisco's also running a program. So we might want to look to what South City is doing. And then on the other hand, the list isn't up, but I vaguely remember the focus of the list of issues being focused on like housing and land use plans. And then there's gun safety and UBI and some homelessness stuff, and then traffic transit. But I didn't really see anything about the climate action playbook. I don't have anything specific from the playbook, but I know that the city and the Sustainability Commission are going through a 5-year update right now. And so I think I just encourage folks to maybe look at how the update is going and maybe pull in some sustainability things to focus on as well. And that's it for me.
Good night. Thanks, Kat. Scott.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of just comments and suggestions. One, I'll start out with maybe my controversial comment. I think back to the 3 pillars that Sue presented 2 hours ago, and I look at the list, and the one I wonder if gun safety is the item for this group here. It's an item that I totally support. I just wonder how it lines up with the 3 pillars for this group, and I'll just leave that with my comment. I guess the other thing on the list that, most of the dates there are dates that have been established by the city. Is there anything else that we want to advocate for, that sort of hasn't already been lined up by a commission or the council for, village centers or El Camino Plan or Moffett Park, et cetera? The one that I thought might be missing is something related to transportation, maybe dedicated bus lanes for El Camino or something. It's a very housing oriented list. I like all of those items. Maybe it's missing something, transportation. Those are it's a good list. Thank you for putting it together.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it needs to be broadened out, and it does look very housing focused at this point. You're absolutely right. Martin.
Yeah, a couple comments. First of all, if I'm remembering the HCD letter correctly, which I may not be because I didn't bother looking it up before in the last day or two, but there was, to follow on to that the comment about deferring to city deadlines. And I'm pretty sure there was a comment in the HCD letter about trying to possibly move up some of the programs. So I think that could be possibly an advocacy item. That's one point. Second one, I just think it's important that when we talk about bicycle and pedestrian safety, we don't lose track of the pedestrian part of that, because I feel like every time I hear a discussion of bicycle and pedestrian safety, it turns into adding bike lanes. And as a pedestrian, frankly, that doesn't do much for me. So I just want, I'm not saying bike safety is unimportant. I just do not want to lose track of the pedestrian angle, given the pedestrian deaths that have been happening.
Thanks, Martin. Mike?
So some kind of an overarching situation that we see all the time is the overburdened staff and the delays associated with that. There were, for example, in front of the council last night, there were a couple of residential programs, one of them for, I think, 1,000 housing units or something, which had actually been in the queue. They've been wanting to do this for, well, one guy said he'd worked on it for 10 years, but certainly 6 years at least. And I remember when that was first proposed, and they basically, the staff told them to go away. They didn't have time to look at it, and they're still queuing it up. So they have to completely finish them off at Park Plan before they start on any of these, on top of the many years they've been delayed. And I'm not suggesting, staff is amazing. They're very competent and they're very busy, but the difference, basically housing, the difference between housing being delayed for 6 or 8 years or denied is almost becomes kind of an academic exercise. So that's an issue we don't bring up maybe enough. It's a difficult problem, but it's a very real problem.
Julia?
So 2 things. One is going back to what Martin said about the dates. So the one thing I noticed is that I remember from the ACC letter is that they thought the ADU toolkit date should be moved up. So that's something that, I would love to see, because there's so many, how do I say, claims or, saying that ADUs will be built in the high opportunity areas, right? Rather than, so anyway, if that's what they're thinking, then definitely that date needs to be moved up. Then the second thing was to kind of respond to what Scott said about gun safety. So recently, Scott, if you remember, we restated our purpose statement, and the reason was because we felt that the 3 pillars was not sufficient for us, and so we really focus on the word livable, which with guns, we might not be very livable. So I think when we talk about 3 pillars, that's, I think what we're thinking of is those are the 3 main things, but there are other aspects to livable that we want to take on. So anyways, so that's why that, I'm sure we all think that's an important issue, but I was just answering that, as to our organization purpose and pillar and all that kind of thing.
So I don't disagree that the dates, getting back to the dates are too far out, because I believe that they are. The response that I have received when I've asked that question is the dates are dependent upon staffing, bandwidth, and funding. And while we can continue to push, and I think it's the right thing to do to pull the dates in, I'm not sure how we can run up against those two facts that we keep hearing. But it doesn't mean we won't try. But that seems to be the consistent response to this. Let me see if there are some things in the chat. I don't know if people have questions. I know we have one other item we need to vote on, California YIMBY. Yeah, I don't think there's any questions that I can see. Oh, Stephen, you had said that you think on transit, there's a study issue on a shuttle service.
Yeah, so I think there is a study issue already in progress regarding a shuttle service that would be run by the city, or, you know, they might use a ride hailing company, but I think there needs to be a clear discussion with regard to subsidizing VTA or contracting with VTA, because, you know, we're not just a city, right? We're part of the valley, and VTA needs a lot of support, right? And I think just, you know, trying to mimic Cupertino with their VIA system, it just seems to draw away from expanding VTA service. So I think that contrast needs to get some discussion before we just say, yeah, hey, let's go with a private shuttle service. And I'm also very suspicious about a leap to new technologies like autonomous service. And we see Apple testing their vehicles in our neighborhoods, and I'm just a skeptic about private lords coming in and like ruling the show, and, you know, using their big funding baskets to get in the door on a shuttle service. And I'm just, you know, I want to be pro VTA here.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything else that they would like to add to this conversation before we move on to our last item? And I really appreciate all of you staying. I know this meeting has gone on much longer than it typically does. So thank you for your interest and for taking your time to not sign off. I know some people had to, but thank you for staying. So we need to vote on California YIMBY Coalition Partner. Do we want them? Do we want to vote to include them as a coalition partner? So this is, Julia, you need to correct me on this because I don't normally do this. These are voting members that vote, correct? Only voting members?
That's right. Only voting members were eligible to vote.
Yeah. Okay. Do all you know, are all of you, most of you probably are voting members, correct? Julia, you think?
I'm looking up.
I'm woefully unprepared for this last item. Sorry.
It should be a pretty easy vote. I don't think we've ever rejected a coalition
We have
partner.
either, but I just want to do this correctly.
Yes, yes.
Are we going to have discussion though before the vote?
We can if you would like.
Yeah, I'd like to say something
Sure.
briefly, but only, I think the way Livable Sunnyvale has had coalition partners, it's not been a burden for anyone. It's been a mutual relationship. And I don't have any problems with that, but I do have a problem with being a part of California YIMBY. And it's because California YIMBY has lots of money and lots of people behind it now. And they have lots of chapters. Mountain View has a chapter. It seems like maybe we'd want to reach out to them for promoting different, kinds of things. They all get the same information. They're all on that pipeline, which, would be a benefit to having them, I suppose, because they'd be a little more in touch with things that are happening by the moment in Sacramento, let's say. So I just wanted to say that because I don't want to see Livable Sunnyvale be subsumed in any way by another entity. That's one thing, and you guys can decide what you want to do. But the other thing is I don't subscribe, never have subscribed with Livable Sunnyvale to a philosophy where number one priority is building housing. We don't care where it is or what it is. If it meets codes, we want it built. So I always feel like we kind of have to pull back a little bit from that full-throated kind of advocacy about housing to have a more considered, the pillar thing and all that. It's just a more holistic view. And projects are different. The city is losing more and more control to the state government, and I'm sure the YIMBY position is, yeah. The more we can lose from the city, the more we can gain through government control and developer control, which, I don't know how associated I personally, anyway, would want to be with that hard line of a position. So that's my speech. And thank you, Agnes, for letting me speak.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on one quick point that Sue made, just one clarification. Is it California YIMBY or YIMBY action that we're talking about here? Because to the point of, the concern about being subsumed, YIMBY, there are two distinct organizations. There's YIMBY Action, which is the one that has chapters, Peninsula for Everyone, Mountain View YIMBY, etc. California YIMBY is more of the state org that, does some local organizing. I think folks have met Aaron Eckhouse, but California YIMBY is a distinct org, and is, sort of not in the, they're very focused, obviously in Sacramento, but don't really do the kind of chapter building that YIMBY Action does.
Okay. And they're not related?
No, they're not related. They similar to what they're talking about. They work together on various issues, but they're not, they're distinct organizations with, I think, distinct goals.
Well, thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we had Aaron Eckhouse speak. Well, he's spoken many times, and we've had forums, and they spoke last meeting on some other topics on state legislation, but we've gone back and forth with them, specifically with relation to the being a partner, and I think definitely satisfied ourselves that we would not in any way be subsumed by them. Anything we do with them is optional and would have to be approved by the board or the members, and so I think, and Angus, who isn't able to be here tonight, it has been kind of our liaison to them and following what they're doing very closely. So like all our partners, where we agree, we we coordinate and work together. Where we don't agree, that's fine. We don't need to agree on everything.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I know there are so many organizations now that it gets confusing who's who and what's what.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
This is California YIMBY we're voting on, not YIMBY Action.
Right. So Julia, does anyone, oh, I'm sorry, does anyone else want to add anything to the, any other
You
thoughts?
need someone to make a, you need someone to make a motion.
Yeah, I think
Discussion
Agnes,
usually happens, discussion usually happens once you've made the motion.
Oh, see, I told you I was real bad at this.
You're not really bad.
Well, I'm I'm not handling this one very well. It's a good thing Martin's not here.
so the only two people, Eric and Jordan, are not members. Everybody, all the other members are eligible to vote.
Okay, so would someone want to make a motion to take a vote on this?
I'll make the motion that we approve California YIMBY as a coalition partner.
I'll second.
Well,
I think I heard a second. So how many in favor? Just, why don't you just put your hand up? Be easy. Okay, it looks like we did it. Okay,
I count to 11.
well, there wasn't anyone dissenting, so I think we have a majority, so I think we did it. I didn't mess that up, right? That's right. I interpreted that.
Well, no, are there any no's? Let's see if there's any no's. Any no's? Okay, now you can say it.
Okay, approved. Okay. Boy, it's a good thing Angela will be back for the next meeting. All right. I really do appreciate all of you for staying as long as you have it. It's been, I think, an important meeting, especially with what we heard from Marie and her group. So thank you all for staying and enjoy what's left of your evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.